name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Welcome back to Miss Cleo's Storytelling Corner. This week, I was thinking about stories that I created and how I created them, and realizing that we all have a different way of doing things. So I'm going to tell you some of the stories that I created. Now, I've told these stories before, and they may not come out exactly the way you've heard them before, but they'll come out. It's the same story. You know, every time you tell a story, maybe it's slightly different. And I was thinking about how did I think about these stories? Well, I thought about the story that I put together that I called Juba Juba. Juba this, Juba that, Juba kill a yellow cat. And I just love that little rhyme, and that's in a lot of things. And then I read somewhere that it came from Africa. And so when I looked it up, it said a little girl with pretty brown eyes. And I said, wow, I could tell a story about that. You know, I was always thinking about telling a story. Then there was a situation where I could remember when I was young, a little, I wanted to deliver papers, you know, and that day, if you could remember, we had paper boys, and I wanted to be a paper boy. But my brother went and said to my mother, Mommy, she can't be a paper boy. That's a girl's thing. Girls don't deliver papers. And my mother said, Cleo, girls don't deliver papers. So I couldn't deliver papers. And then my brother went downtown. He became a boot black. You know what a boot black is? Or a lot of you do. Well, when I was a kid, little boys, I think they had to be 10. I'm not sure, but 10, 11, I don't know how old they. But they used to go down to City Hall, and they used to get this little license, a bootback license, and they used to get this little box and put this license on, and the little box had like a shoe on it, and in the box had all kinds, you know, shoe polish and buffers and things. And on Saturdays, the boys would go downtown, and they would shine shoes. Sometimes during the week, they would shine shoes. That's when everybody wore shoes and not so many sneakers. And there were a lot of suits and dresses and hats downtown. So you'd go downtown and you'd stand by, and some man would come along and said, yeah, do my shoes. And he'd put his shoe on top of his box, and they would shine his shoes. And they had something called a spit shine. They'd spit and shine their shoe, and that rag used to snap, you know. And when they finished, they had a beautiful pair of shiny shoes. Now that was years. So I said, oh, wow, I'd like to do that. I want to go downtown and be a boot black. And know what he said? Mommy, she can't be a boot black because she's a girl. And Mom said, Cleo, you cannot be a boot black because there's girl things and there's boy things. That was a day when there really was girl things and boy things. I don't know if that's true today. And so I couldn't be a boot black, so I cried. I went to my room and I cried. I said, I can't do anything. I can't make any money. Why could he make money and I can't make any money? And of course, who comes along? My grandma. And I tell her the whole horrible story. And she says, Cleo, things don't last forever. Just be patient. I said, patient. I can't do anything that I want to do. Philip gets to do everything and I don't get to do anything. And she said, it'll pass. You just be patient. And she told me the story of Juba. And she said, let me tell you this story about this little girl who lived in Africa. I said, Grandma, you never been to Africa? I said, that's all right. My grandma said, that's all right. I know this story, and I'm going to tell this story to you. So I said, all right, tell me the story. She said, once upon a time, there was this little girl in Africa, and her name was Juba. And she wanted to be a great warrior, and she wanted to go hunting with the men. But of course, she had to stay with her mother and mind the children and cook the dinner while the men went out to hunt. And she would cry to her mother all the time. But mother, Sagab, he doesn't go with the men. He said, Sagab is special, Juba. Sagab is special. He likes being with the children and the cooking, and the men don't want him to come with him. So he is with us. You understand? No, I don't understand. I want to be a great hunter. I can hunt. I could kill a big yellow cat. I could do that. I could hunt, Mother. No, Juba. Now let us make the dinner for the men. And so she would help her mother with the cooking and the other women, and she would take care of the little children. And in her spare time, she would go out and she would shoot her spear. And she always made her target. She would shoot her spear and shoot her spear. Oh, how she loved to be in the woods and to hunt. And she would search out, but she could not bring anything home because she was a girl. And girls, they marry, they have children, and they cook. And that's what she had to do. And one day, she was really complaining to her mother. And her mother says, you know, Juba, everyone has their place in the village. The men have their place. We have our place. The children have their place. The animals have their place. Everything has its place, Juba. And if we mess with that and we mess it up, it would not be good. It would not be good. So Juba just bent her head and walked away. Well, one day, Juba was out in the forest. And she had her spear, because she always had her spear. And she saw something behind a bush, but she was not sure. And then she heard a crumbling coming closer and closer to her. And then she saw a big yellow cat, and she put back her spear and she threw it, and the big yellow cat landed right before her. And she ran home as fast as she could. She ran home as fast, and she said, Mother, I killed a yellow cat. I killed him. I killed him, she said. Juba, it is time to start the meal and tend the children. Come. Mother, I killed a big yellow cat. A big yellow cat. Come, mother. Oh, Juba. And her mother came with her. And she brought the other women and Sagab and the children. Of course, she couldn't leave them there by themselves. And there they came to this big yellow cat. The women just breathed, took in a big breath and could not believe it. And her mother said, this cannot be so. This cannot. Sagab, come. Here, take this spear. And they had not seen the children, and Sagab had not seen the big yellow tiger. And he said, Sagab, come. Let me show you how to shoot this spear. And she showed him. Sagab said, Sagab, I do not want to shoot a spear. You can shoot this spear. Come. And she walked him a little ways down the path, and she says, pull back your hand. And Sagab closed his eyes. He could not see. And she says, okay, shoot your spear. Sagab went, and everyone said, Sagab, you killed a big yellow cat. And Sagab, I killed a big yellow cat? Yes, Sagab, you killed a big yellow cat. And the women went back to the village, and they got rope, and they got things to tie up the big yellow cat, and they drug him back to the village. And when the men came, they saw this big yellow cat, and they said, who? Sagab killed a big yellow cat. And Juba silently walks back into her hut, and she sits there while the whole village is preparing a party for Sagab. Oh, there's food, and the men are so happy that now they could bring Sagab hunting with them. And Sagab had his chest out, and he said, yes, I can kill a big yellow cat. Yes, I can. And Juba, she sits there in her hut as they prepare. And once all was ready, and they were singing and dancing, and grandmother comes into Juba's hut and says, Juba, come, join the celebration. And Juba says, I cannot. I killed the big yellow cat. Not Sagab, I killed. She said, Juba, that is what is today, but it will not always be this way. The time will come, but right now, we must celebrate Sagab. It is not your time yet. Be happy that you killed a big yellow cat. We all know it. All of the women know it. Come. And so Juba goes out as they're singing, and she stands as they celebrate Sagab. Oh, how sad she feels inside. And then all the women get around in a big circle, and they have their pounding sticks, and they start singing or chanting, Juba this, Juba that, Juba kill a yellow cat, Juba up, Juba down, Juba running all around. And the men said, "What is this that you are chanting?" And they said, "Oh, you know how Juba is. We are just making her feel good. Don't worry, we will all sing to Juba." And grandmother looks at the men and she says, "We will all sing to Juba. For she is fair and she is growing and she is a beautiful girl. And we will sing." So the men sang and the women sang, "Juba this, Juba that, Juba kill a yellow cat, Juba up, Juba down, Juba running all around." And Juba looks at them and looks at the women. And then the women said, stomping their sticks to the ground, "Juba this, Juba that," as their heads turned to Juba. "Juba this, Juba that, Juba kill a yellow cat," as they bow down. They sing Juba. And Juba is satisfied. And Juba is proud that she is recognized. And she says, "One day I will be a mighty hunter. But I also want to be as wise as grandmother one day." The story of Juba. She had to wait her turn. Like so many of us do, we have to wait our turn. I mean, hey. And I looked at my grandmother, and she said to me, "Well, Cleo, this'll pass. You'll get your way. Don't you worry. And so this will pass." And that is the story of Juba. The many ways that I tell it, that is the story of Juba. And how I told that story, it was all in my head. My boss said to me one day, she says, "Cleo, we want you to tell a story. We want you to tell a story at this event." I didn't have a story to tell, but I had that rhyme in my head that kept going, Juba this, Juba that. So I said, all right, I'm going to tell a story. And all day I walked around and the story started developing in my head. And that's how my stories start. They start developing in my head. And they have a beginning, a middle, and a climax, and an ending. And when I found that ending, I said, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell that story. I had never told a story before. I had not even told it out loud to myself. It was just in my head. And so I finally told it out loud. And it came out the way it came out. And my boss was pleased. And I was pleased. I said, wow, not only did the audience hear that story for the first time, so did I. And I was very pleased with it. So, and they were pleased with it. So that's kind of how I create. I write it in my head. And I've just started in the last few years writing my stories on paper. But right now we're going to go to a break. And I will be right back with Miss Cleo's Storytelling Corner.
Hi, my name is Cammie Starks. I would recommend any parent to participate in this program due to the fact that it helps us learn about what the kids are learning and also to better our children in the community. And I just give thanks to Lucy, that recommended me to come to the program. And it's just been an honor and finding out the development of the children of the school systems that's very needed. And I just give thanks, and I ask that any parent friends, family to, participate, because it's very helpful to find out what's going on with the children and also to help the children. And I just give thanks.
We all know smoking is harmful, right? But did you know that even after the smoke clears, the danger remains? This is called third-hand smoke. Third-hand smoke is the toxic residue left behind on surfaces like furniture, walls, or even clothes. These harmful chemicals can linger for days, weeks, or even months. Young children and pets are especially vulnerable. They can ingest these toxins simply by touching contaminated surfaces and then putting their hands or toys in their mouth. The best way to protect your loved ones? Make your home and car completely smoke-free. Remember, it's not just about the smoke you see, but the unseen toxins you leave behind. Protect your family from third-hand smoke. Choose a smoke-free environment.
Welcome back to Miss Cleo's Storytelling Corner. Today we're talking about just creating stories. I'm talking about stories that I've created in my time that I've been a storyteller, which would be many. I started telling stories as a child, and the reason I told stories. I love books. I've always loved books. But I haven't always been able to read. So I would just tell stories in the place of that. And then when I got grown, I had to really dig into the books and learn how to read better than they taught me in school, because when I was in school, I was in general studies. And in general studies, they geared you to the insurance companies or the factories. And maybe, hospitals and nurses' aides or something like that. They didn't really pay that much attention to you. And so if you wanted to get into the reading program so you could read better, that was very difficult, and you probably couldn't get in it. I couldn't get in it for 4 years that I was there. And if you wanted to go, general students, they weren't, I don't know how they thought. I really don't know how they thought. You couldn't go see a play. No, you couldn't go see a play because you were a general student. So that meant, I guess, you wouldn't probably like plays. So I went to my guidance counselor and I said, I'd like to go and see a play. I think they were going to see Taming of the Shrew. And my aunt and I had read that Taming of the Shrew, that story, and so I didn't think it was so hard to understand. We see movies with that kind of genre all the time. I said, I don't understand why I can't go see that play, but I was not allowed to go see that play because I was in general studies, and general studies didn't do that kind of thing. I hope now these days that they have changed that and looked at young people the way they are. If someone's interested in something, I think they should encourage it. But I had to encourage it by myself. And so I did, and I really worked hard at trying to read because I really couldn't read that well in school. And there was no attention paid to it, no anywhere. So, but I did learn, and I did start reading lots of books, and it was my dream. So it came true because I persisted. So if you think you can do something and you want to do something, you just keep persisting. Well, I'm gonna tell you this story that another head story, all in my head. And this is when I was working for the conference house of the United Church of Christ. And they wanted a story for this event. Well, I said, okay, I'll create a story. And so I thought about it. But I thought there was like, it's going to be like a dinner party or something, a couple of people, maybe 10 or so people. They didn't tell me it was an event. I just thought I was going to just talk to a couple of people. Well, when I got there were a whole lot more people than I ever thought. And on top of that, they weren't people that I knew. They were people from out of town and from other states. And I said, oh my God. And then my directors came up to me and said, now, Cleo, this is a story. We don't want you preaching. We want you a story, because the audience was, I think more than half were Afro-Americans. Because, she was not an Afro-American. And I don't know why she said that to me. I said, I know so I said to her, I know what a story is. So I told this story, and I in the afternoon, I couldn't figure out what the end of this story could be. So I had two endings. And when I got there, and I got to the ending, well, you'll see. And I'll explain to you after how I got to the ending. Well, when I was a little girl, my mother made me go to church all the time. I was so sick of going to church. And every time me and my brother would have a fight, my mother would set us down with the Bible, and she would give us a scripture to read. And we'd have to sit there and read that scripture like we knew what it was they were talking about. We didn't. And so I'd sit there and I'd read and I'd read. Oh, my goodness. Me and my brother. Well, I was just too dumb. I said, when I grow up, I am never. I know some of you already know, don't you? I am never going to go to church again. When I get 18, I'm out of here. I remember that story. Well, I grew, and my mother kept sending me there to read these stories. And one day I read something about, this disciple, Peter. He had his own mind, and he said to Jesus, well, Jesus asked him who he was, and he told him, and that was good. But then, when it was time for him to stand up for Jesus, he ran away. Yes, he did. He ran away. I said, that Bible is just too much for anybody. Jesus is too much for anybody. And It's just too bad. It is just too bad that nobody understands that book anyway. And one day it said Peter was out in a boat, and he saw Jesus on the shore, and he swam to him, and Jesus fed him, and he was really nice to him, and I think Peter must have been feeling pretty bad. And that's what I remember of that. I don't remember all of that. Just that Peter ran away and Peter denied Jesus. And I remembered that. That's all I remember. And I grew. And my parents, they worked really hard to send me to college. And they wanted me to be something big, But when I got to college, something hit me, and I saw people who were poor, and I thought that I could help them, because maybe some of them needed to learn different things in a different way, and I knew that I could help them, so I joined this group. And I went down to the soup kitchen. Oh, and it was a wonderful, wonderful place. And I say wonderful because you met all kinds of people from all over who had all different kinds of stories. You really didn't know why somebody was in the soup kitchen, because there was nurses and doctors and business people and people in the street, and people who had been in the service. This was in the 70s. And so you just didn't know. And everything was a surprise to you. And I think that Jesus was calling me. Yes, he was. He was calling me. Well, when I went home and told my mother what I was doing, my mother said, I did not send you to college to work in no soup kitchen. I did not. As hard as I worked, and you gonna end up there? No, you're not. I said, but you don't understand. I had turned myself around. But my mother was someplace I didn't even understand. She didn't want nothing to do with it, and she didn't want me to have nothing to do with it. She wanted me to be something special in her world. Oh, my mother cried, and she cried. We're just teaching the people how to be a part of the community, how to be productive people in the community in their way. That's all, Ma. I'll show them how. I'd love you to come down. I'm going to come on down. And so my mother came down to the soup kitchen. And she started talking to the people. And she started telling them what they ought to do and where their lives ought to be. And then after a while, she started listening. And my mother started changing. I couldn't believe it. My mother started changing. And then one day when this young man came into her office, or our office, and she said to him, you ought to go out there and get a job. I've seen jobs open right down the street, and they're hiring every day. And this was a young man who spoke very well and was very mannerable. She did not understand why he was there. And she kept adamant. And one day he came in to the office and he said to her, ma'am, I cannot read. What do you mean? My mother said, you can't read. Didn't you grow up in Hartford, Connecticut? Didn't you go to the Hartford school system? Why can't you read? He said, ma'am, well, I went to school. I couldn't read, and they laughed at me all the time. They laughed at me. And so I left. And when I got into the street, they accepted me just the way I was. They didn't ask me to change. They didn't ask me to read. They just accepted me just the way I was, and I stayed there. Now when I wanted to get a job, I have to ask my friends to read the paper for me. You mean every morning when I see you reading the paper, you're not reading? I'm not reading the paper, no. And my friends know that. And they help me. You see, in the street, they helped me do what I wanted to do. But in school, they just laughed at me. So I never went back. And my mother just looked. She couldn't believe that there was someone of his age, an adult, that could not read, that grew up in the same school system that her daughter and her children grew up in. She couldn't believe it. And she heard story after story. And guess what? She didn't have the answers. She did as much as she could, but she didn't have the answers, just like I didn't have the answers. We just had to do the best we could. And we had to pray. And after a while, my mother came there every day. And one day, she was coming out of the soup kitchen. She had to close up by herself. And as she was about to turn off the lights, she heard, Peter, do you love me? Feed my sheep. And she looked around this dark room. And Jesus said again, Peter, do you love me? And my mother said, yes, I do, Lord, and closed the door. And that's the beginning of her story. And that's the story that I told on that day, with slight changes, but it's still the same story. So that's the second story that I put together during my work, during the time that I worked for other people. And there were lots of stories that I put together. And I have one last story for you, but first we're going to go to a break, and I will be right back.
Hi, my name is Rhonda Menifee, and I am a new leader of the Hartford Parent University program. The program to me is very important because I feel like a lot of parents really need to get involved in their children's lives. I don't have younger children right now, but I do have grandkids. I have older children, and if this program was around back when my kids were smaller, even though they graduated from high school, I was very active, in their schools. I think a lot of parents would have been a lot more involved because this program actually gets parents involved. They do different programs that make you want to come, that make you want to be involved in your kids' programs. I have experienced some of the programs that they have to offer, and I might say I really enjoyed it, which I know my grandkids would really enjoy it. So this program is very, very important because the way things are going today, our kids really, really need their parents in their lives and focused on what it is that they're doing to help brighten their future.
Welcome back to Miss Cleo Storytelling Corner. I have one more story for you, and I might have to shorten it just a little bit. The other week, I told you a story about the beautiful girl who married a fish. Well, this is sort of like that story, and but a little different. And I found this story somewhere in the Harvard Public Library many years ago, and that's why I told the other story, where Fish of the Deep. Remember that? I did that just a few weeks ago. Well, this is a story just like that, long, long ago, where there was this family. There was a father, mother, sister, and a brother. And the girl's name was Belinda. And the mother would send Belinda down to the river to get water every day. And she would come back with the most wonderful water, fresh, nothing, no sticks, nothing in it. It's like spring water. And her brother would come back with water that was not like Belinda's. And his mother said, I want you to get water like Belinda. But Belinda had gone down to the river, and she had put her bucket into the water, and it went down, 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 down. And she thought she had lost it. And this fish comes up and says, I will get you the most beautiful water, the freshest water that there is. You just come every day, and I will get you water. Well, every day when she came, he got her this beautiful spring water. He went deep, deep, deep. She did not know where he went. And he came back with fresh spring water. Well, the mother said to the brother, I want you to get water like Belinda. So one day he decided to follow her. And he saw the fish, and he saw the fish go down into the river and bring back this beautiful water for Belinda. And he went back and he told his mother and his father. And they were very angry, and they thought some evil spirit was catching their daughter, and they were very angry. So the next time Belinda went to the water, she told the fish, my families, they're very angry, and they may kill you. And he says, do not worry. Wherever I am, you will also be there. I will not go away. So one day, her family sent her to the market. Oh, I forgot to tell you one thing. The fish told her, if you see blood on your hands, then I will be dead. But don't worry. We will be together. So the next day, the family sent her to the marketplace. And she is there all day selling her wares. And during late afternoon, she saw blood on her hands. And she runs back to the river as fast as she can. And the fish does not come. And she waits and he does not come. Then she goes back to her hut and she sits outside in a chair and is very sad, and she cries. And her brother looks out of the window, and the chair begins to sink. And he says to his father, Father, Melinda is sinking into the earth. Melinda is sinking into the earth. Melinda is sinking into the earth. Go away. Go away. And he runs to his mother. He says, Mother, Melinda is sinking into the earth. Melinda is sinking into the earth. Stop it now. Stop it. Please, Mother, look. Melinda is sinking into the earth. And his mother looks out the window and sees her daughter sinking into the earth. Now she is up to her chest. She is in the earth. And she runs down as fast as she can. And by the time she gets there, all she can grab is her hair. And she's pulling her hair. She's pulling her hair. She's pulling her daughter up. She's pulling her daughter up. But her daughter sinks into the ground. And all that is left was her hair. And that is the story of the girl and the fish. Now, when I told that story to young people in school, they just stopped and they just looked at me. I mean, they looked at me like, okay, where is she? Is she coming back? What? And they just looked at me. So I had to think quick. So I said to them, where do you think she is? And they looked around. Where is she? Where is she? And of course, one person would always say, she's with the fish. And I said, yes, she is with the fish. And they're living very happily ever after. And that's the end of our show today. And I am so glad that I could be with you today. And next week I'll have more stories for you. And send me some stories. It wouldn't be a bad idea, huh? Send me a story about when you made up a story, when you pretended, and tell me how it affected your life and how, if you're grown and you remember that story that you made up when you were a kid, it must have affected your life in some way. So come on, give us a ring out, text us a story. But for right now, I have to go. So, dream a little, write a little, or read a little, write a little. Dream big. And I'll see you next week.